بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. Some more hadith on the various different things that are to occur as foretold by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These things are to occur before the Day of Judgment. This hadith is related by Imam Abu Nu'aym from Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu. يأتي على العلماء زمان الموت أحب إلى أحدهم من الذهب الأحمر. A time will come on the ulama. So this will be an experience specifically for the ulama. So a time will come on the ulama where death will be more beloved to them, to any one of them, more beloved to them than red gold. So pure gold, most purified gold, if they were given that, death would be even more beloved to them than that. One way to look at this is that if a person has a job to do, a responsibility to fulfill, something that they need to do based on a vocation that they have, or a responsibility that they feel they have, a moral responsibility, religious responsibility, and you're unable to do it, the detrimental impact is extremely severe. That's why even if you look at the rules of the workplace, if you are in a job that you disagree with morally, then that would have an extremely negative impact on your life. Because day in and day out, you're having to do something which you absolutely disagree with. And human beings are honest people, generally speaking. They do what they think is right. But if you have to live for so many months or years doing something that is a lie, doing something that you completely disagree with, over and over again, then isn't that torture? That's where you're suppressed, for example. But if you're voluntarily doing it in the sense that you can't find any other job, or you're forced to take this job because you've got a certain lifestyle, or whatever the issue is. But deep down, some people will overcome themselves. Some people will overcome themselves in the sense that they'll convince themselves that it's okay. But then that will have a negative impact on their worship as well. Because once we start becoming lax in one thing, that just leads to laxity in something else. It's all interconnected. Now those people who are in a situation like that, where they have to do something that they disagree with, morally and religiously, and they continue to worship and try hard otherwise, then they're always going to be in a dilemma with regards to their job, with regards to their vocation, with regard to their activity. So now think of it from an alim's perspective. An alim with the responsibilities, learnt all of these sciences, learnt all of this knowledge, the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Quran, and he knows the teachings, he knows the Sharia, he has the teachings of the ulama based on the Quran and Sunnah, he has the history before him, and all the rest of it. He's got the life history of all of these great ulama of the past who had to deal with a lot of opposition, who stuck to their faith, who adhered to their faith, kept their feet on the ground. And now he's unable to do that. He can't correct the wrong. He can't enjoin the right. He can't say anything. He can't change anything. He can't even say something properly. Now imagine what that is going to do. Now a simple example, just a simple example. If you look at the situation that in some countries today, like in Egypt, well, inshallah it's changed now. But in Egypt for the last 30 so years, or more, 30, 40, 50 years in fact at least. In Syria, and in many of these other Muslim countries, except for example Saudi, keeping a long beard is a problem. It's severely discouraged, in fact it's banned in some countries, or it was banned, like in Tunisia and other places. I know a friend of mine who's a hafiz of the Quran, PhD student in America. Every year when he would go back to Tunisia, he'd have to knock off his beard. He'd have to shave his beard or clip it really small. and he would hide himself. That the day before when he would have to do this, because next day he was flying to visit back home his parents and so on, he wouldn't come to the masjid, he'd be hiding. But he'd have to undergo this. There was another brother, similarly, when he had to go to Syria, he had to do the same thing. Now in some countries it wasn't banned as such, but you were harassed. So like Egypt was that kind of a situation. It wasn't officially banned necessarily, but anybody with a big beard, you will have a problem on roadblocks, police, government agencies. When you go to get your paperwork done, and you go to get any official work done, you would have a problem. So, as you can see, this is highly demoralizing. Now what happens with the ulama in that kind of a situation is that they're going to be also under the same kind of harassment. So either they're going to shorten their beards, or they're going to keep them long and undergo the harassment. But how many do you think would keep it long and undergo severe harassment for year after year after year after year, for decades? In fact, some were born into the system where they saw and they were told by their teachers, and they knew that if you had a long beard, they would read it in the books, "I'fu al-luha, wahfu shawarib." The Prophet ﷺ clearly saying, lengthen your beards, shorten your mustache. They would read this, but they couldn't do it. Now, I'm sure some ulama would pass justification. So there is a justification for them from the Shafi'i school. So in the Shafi'i school, there is some leniency in this regard. So that's why they would go with that opinion. Whereas in the Hanafi, Maliki and Hanbali schools, there is no leniency in that regard. But then in order to justify their setting based on what they would make certain changes. For example, when I was in Syria, I saw a very large poster which had photographs, a very large picture, a poster of maybe at least 30, 40 ulama on there or more. Now if you look at, and they were placed on that poster according to how, when they died. Now the strangest thing was that the first, if there were 6 lines on that poster, I can't remember exactly, if there were 6 lines of pictures, 6 rows. The first 5 rows, every single alim on there, all the old ones from Syria, they all had big beards. The last one, the last line, you had 1 or 2 with beards, the others, now you could see that it was creeping in. Now clearly you could see that there was a massive difference. And that had to be something to do with the regime, the last 50 years or so. Because before this, nobody had a problem with a beard as such. Before last 50, 100 years, nobody really had a problem with the beard throughout the world. And, I don't know what caused it or whatever. Don't like to belabor this point, but it's just an example. So now what you're going to have is, when you're in that kind of a situation, you're either going to be sold out to it, or you're going to, and then you're going to justify it maybe, or you're going to try to stick strong. Now, I'm sure there are many of those who cannot have beards, but would love to have one. And day in and day out for 30 years, can you imagine their psyche? Can you imagine their feeling? Can you imagine the demoralizing situation that they're in? That is how bad it is. To have to do something that you do not agree with. That is how bad it is. Now look at the Muslim women in France, where they're not allowed to cover their faces. Can you see how bad that is? They want to do it. This is not about somebody forcing somebody else to do it. They want to do it. In Belgium, in some states in Belgium, it's like that as well. They fine you on the spot. In Tunisia, what I was told by one of the Tunisians under the old regime is that if a woman had a hijab on, then what they would do is, some of these police or whatever they would come and light a fire to her hijab, so she'd have to take it off. Now this is happening in Muslim countries, whereas in non-Muslim countries there's freedom. Absolute freedom in most Muslim countries, except France is some silly exception. But that's basically what it is. Imagine living under that. Get into the mindset of the person. Get into the mind of the person who has to undergo this. There may be a few people who are forced by their father or grandfather or whatever husband to to cover their face. It may be a few of them. But the majority are not like that. We know, this is the life we live, we know. So what about the majority who you are psychologically impacting? Because you're not allowing them to do something that they think is so important for their faith. You know, it's like forcing somebody to go out naked in a sense. How would they feel? Some may be getting used to it, some will get used to it. But others will do it because they have to do it, but they will just inside the turmoil that they'll be going in. Now that will give us an understanding of the status of ulama in this situation, where this hadith mentions that a time will come upon the ulama where death will be more beloved to them than red gold, than pure gold, because they can't live a life of truth to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They can't live a life of truth to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If they want to live that life, then they have to literally like shun everything and go away. They can't speak the truth on a mimbar. They have to keep speaking about the same things. Fadila, about, just common things like salat and so on. They can't really talk about the truth, about the wrongs that are happening. That's their preaching. That's what their responsibility is. But they're unable to fulfill it. So can you imagine the psychological state that person must be in? That's why I think, it's ajib, but in England we're a lot better off than Muslim scholars were in other places, in a sense. We've got other challenges. I think it may even balance out in a sense. We've got other challenges. Though we may be able to do what we want, but there's other challenges that obviously affect us. The fact that we don't hear the adhan 5 times a day, numerous other things, the salam, the lots of, just seeing Muslims and just, giving a lot of dua and, having to deal with a lot of other things. There's obviously a lot of that. I don't know what is better, but at least in this case, psychologically, we're not affected in that sense, inshallah. Inshallah. But anyway, that may give some understanding of this hadith. The next hadith is related by Daylami from Ali, radiyallahu anhu, Ali and karramallahu wajhah. يأتي على الناس زمان لا يتبع فيه العالم ولا يستحيا فيه من الحليم ولا يوقر فيه الكبير ولا يرحم فيه الصغير يقتل بعضهم بعضا على الدنيا قلوبهم قلوب الأعاجم وألسنتهم ألسنة العرب لا يعرفون معروفا ولا ينكرون منكرا يمشي الصالح فيهم مستخفيا أولئك شرار خلق الله لا ينظر الله إليهم يوم القيامة. A time will come upon the people when the alim will not be followed. The scholar will not be followed. His words will not be followed. And neither will a person with clemency, forbearance, an old, respectable, forbearing person, nobody will be shy of such a person. Normally, the idea is that there's a hadith. Imam Ghazali mentions is that if you are doing an act and you're not sure whether you should do it or not, think to yourself that if there was a respectable member, an older, respectable member of your community, your family, watching you, would you do that act or not? So Imam Ghazali is using the example of an old, respectable, honorable man of a person of your community, of your family, as a scale of determining whether your act is good or bad. So this hadith is mentioning that will no longer be the case. People will be brazenly doing things in front of honorable people as well. So there will be no embarrassment. That's why he's saying there will be no embarrassment in front of such people. وَلَا يُوَقَّرُ فِيهِ الْكَبِيرُ. The older person, an elderly person or an older person to one, will not be respected, will not be honored and respected, because we're supposed to give honor to our elders. And the young will not be dealt with mercy, which is again something that we should be doing, which is dealing with our young with mercy. And people will kill each other, murder each other for the sake of the dunya. So that will be their motive of the dunya. Maybe it's a drug related thing, it's about area, maybe it's about more money, it's about a woman, or the opposite, a man. That's also been a case, that's also now quite a widespread thing of women poisoning others. Was that person in America just about 2-3 years ago that worked for NASA, and it was 2 women feuding about 1 man. So you've seen all of this. So people will kill each other for the sake of the dunya. Does that mean are you allowed to kill somebody for the deen? Well, in a valid way, if, for example, it's a penalty in an Islamic state, if where there's a death penalty, murder for a murder, or in the battle, that those are for the deen, purely for the sake of the deen. Now, there are people who will indiscriminately kill innocent people in this world, thinking it's for the deen. That's a misunderstanding. That's their confusion, deviance, and that's just basically a major problem, that they're taking the deen in their own hands and doing things indiscriminately, which is wrong as well. Then it says that their hearts will be like the hearts of non-Arabs. I'm going to translate this literally, but I'm going to explain it. Whereas their tongues will be like the tongues of Arabs. Now, I think the way I'll translate this is that a'ajim means somebody who can't speak properly. And Arab refers to somebody who's very eloquent in their speech. So I think what this is talking about is that they'll be very eloquent, very nice in their speech to you, but their hearts will be like animals. Their hearts will not be clean. You'll understand that from a number of other narrations that speak about the same thing. Their hearts will be impure. The inside they'll be really angry. They will harbor a lot of hatred, malice, greed, but they'll say nice things to you because to benefit from you, to show you as a friend, but they're really not. So these are different forms of hypocrisy that will take place. لا يعرفون معروفا. I mean, morality will be so twisted that they will not know what is good. They will not know the good. They will not recognize the good and virtue, and they will not reject and deny the evil, the wrong, the unvirtue, the disvirtue. And يمشي الصالح فيهم مستخفيا. The pious, righteous person among them will have to walk in hiding. So he'll have to hide himself among them, whatever that shape that may take. أولئك شرار خلق الله. The people of that time will be the worst of the creation of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not look at them on the day of judgment. The next hadith is from Daylami, from Jabir. Imam Ahmad and Tabarani have also related it from Abu Umama radiyallahu anhu. It says, يجيء يوم القيامة المصحف والمسجد والعترة فيقول المصحف يا ربي حرقوني ومزقوني ويقول المسجد يا ربي خربوني وعطلوني وضيعوني وتقول العترة يا ربي طردونا وقتلونا وشردونا وأثوا Yes. So, on the day of judgment, the Quran will come. The Mus'haf, the copy of the Quran will come. The masjid will come. And so will a person's family. The Mus'haf, the Quran will say, Ya Rabb, they burnt me, they tore me to pieces. Which means they didn't fulfill what I had to do, they just really corrupted what I had to say and my teachings and so on. The masjid will say, O Rabb, O Lord, they neglected me. They left me in a neglected state. They left me empty and devoid. And they wasted me. Despite the fact that they had me, they wasted me. And the family will say, Ya Rabb, they rejected me. They did not look after me. They did not tie the knots of kinship. They weren't good with me. And they killed us. And they did these different things to us. So this will be the complaints of those who we have a right towards. The Quran, the masjid, and our family. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I will deal with. And I am the best person, the best one to deal with this. Don't worry about it, I will deal with this. It's possible that the itra is referring to the family of the Prophet ﷺ in particular. It doesn't say that in the hadith, but it's possible. And this could refer to the time of the Banu Umayyah, when they were killing, they killed Hussein radiallahu anhu, then they killed Abdullah ibn Zubayr, who wasn't necessarily family, but much of the family. I mean, this was their problem. The Umayyads had a problem with the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In fact, there were cases when, in the time of Yazid, as related by the author of this book, that they also, with regards to masjid, somewhere, one masjid, they must have tied their camels in it. And during Walid ibn Abdul Malik's time, another Umayyad Khalif, the Quran was torn to pieces. And it's also possible that the Quran being torn refers to not acting upon it. But Walid ibn Abdul Malik did have some strange things to say about the Quran and so on. He said some crazy things. Next hadith is related by Abu Shaykh from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu. من اقتراب الساعة أن يصلي 50 نفسا لا يقبل لأحدهم صلاة. It is from the closeness of the Day of Judgment that 50 people will come together to make salat. We are jama'ah of 50 people, and not one of their salats will be accepted. And as I mentioned, it could be different reasons. They're not fulfilling the obligations. They're not fulfilling the integrals of the salat. They don't know how to make salat properly because they haven't studied the masail, the rulings of salat properly. Maybe they don't have wudu properly. Maybe their clothing is not pure. Maybe they've just consumed something haram. Maybe they have no concentration. It could be both spiritual, physical, legal, all aspects. That they're performing salat, but it's without much care. That's 50. It's understandable where it's a minority, maybe one person, maybe 2, maybe 10 out of 50. We said none of them. None of their salats will be accepted. Another hadith is related by Imam Muslim from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu. أن الساعة لا تقوم حتى لا يقسم ميراث ولا يفرح بغنيمة. The day of judgment will not occur until inheritance of a person will not be distributed. So time will come when inheritance will stop being distributed. And whenever there'd be booty that would be acquired, nobody would be happy about it. The thing about this mirath is that there's another hadith which supports the saying that make sure you study the science of the distribution of wealth, because it will be one of the first things to be lifted. And ulama have given different reasons of why that may be the case. Number one, it's a bit of a complicated, and it's not complicated, it's complicated in the sense that it requires maths. And maths is kind of a very different kind of function to understanding the meaning of a hadith, which is a bit different. Understanding a verse of the Quran, reading a tafsir, it's different than calculating something. And maybe, so firstly, it's a bit difficult because maths is something which is not everybody likes. For example, Imam Suyuti, who wrote on pretty much every subject that I was out there, he said that I've mastered every subject except 2, and one of them he said is maths. So that is normally the horror story for many people. So one could be that reason. Another reason could be that people will stop distributing their wealth properly, which is already the case in many areas. They just write a will and give it to whoever they want to. They just leave it to the wife, they just leave it to this, and they don't give their children, or they give it to one son, one daughter, they give it to somebody else. There are many people today who are doing that, and they're giving it away to others. It's okay to give it before your death, without a view to deprive your children, because that's wrong. It's makruh to do that, but it's valid. But after the death it can't be. But the problem is that the law of the land says whatever your will says. So many people write in their will that it's going to all go to this foundation or this institution, and their children won't get anything. Their legal inheritors, meaning the religious inheritors, should get. So if there aren't many people asking this question to the ulama who've studied this subject, the ulama are not going to be sitting practicing this subject every day, because there's going to be nobody to ask them about it. And it's not something that's so enjoyable that you do every day. You can read a book of hadith, a book of commentary of hadith, a tafsir of the Quran, some fiqh. You can read that every day because you're learning something. But sitting there doing mathematical calculations, who would do that? So you can see how that might be lost first. Okay, next hadith is related by Ibn Mardawayh from Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu. من أشراط الساعة تقارب الأسواق. قلت ما تقارب الأسواق. It's from the signs of the day of judgment, and I'll translate this literally. Markets will contract, or will come close together. That initially seems to indicate globalization. So now you could sit at your computer and trade in all the different markets of the world. You can trade in the Japan market, Australian market. You can trade wherever you want. You start a website and people can order throughout the world, and you ship it using FedEx, UPS, and so on and so forth. So apparently that's what it seems to indicate in the beginning. However, Sahabi said, what does that mean? ما تقارب الأسواق قال أن يشكو الناس بعضهم إلى بعض قلة الإصابة أي الربح. That no, people will begin to complain to each other about a decrease in their profits. And we see that that's another issue that is a constant complaint that we are, including this country, we've seen other countries in the Eurozone who are having to implement severe austerity measures just so that they can break even, right, within their economies. England seems to be going in that direction despite having its glorious past and despite having its resources and all of its mines and everything else. Wallahu a'lam. It seems like there's something going, there's obviously reasons for all of this. وَيَكْثُرُ وَلَدُ الْبَغْيِ وَتَفْشُ الْغِيبَةِ. وَلَدُ الْبَغْيِ, that is illegitimate children, will be on the increase. And that is something which is not even a big deal anymore. Half the people you might be studying with may be illegitimate. It's just a matter of fact. It's just a matter of fact. وَتَفْشُ الْغِيبَةِ. Backbiting will be on the increase, will be widespread, prevalent. Ghiba, widespread and prevalent. Ghiba. وَيُعْظَمْ رَبُّ الْمَالِ. Some of this has also come in other ahadith. The person who has wealth will be respected for his wealth. يُكْرَمْ مِنْ جِهَةِ مَالِهِ. وَتَرْتَفِعُ الْأَصْوَاتِ فِي الْمَسَاجِدِ. This is quite a common feature in many of these ahadith, that noises will be raised in the masajid for whatever reason. وَيَظْهَرْ أَهْلُ الْمُنْكَرِ. And the people of evil will become manifest and appear. وَيَظْهَرُ الْبِنَاءِ. And many constructions will take place. You'll see constructions going up everywhere. High constructions. The next hadith is related by Ibn Mardawayh, again from Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu. من أشراط الساعة سوء الجوار وقطيعة الأرحام وأن يعطل السيف من الجهاد وأن تجتلب الدنيا بالدين. That it's from the signs of the day of judgment where people will be bad neighbors. And I think we are probably indicated in this as well. We're very bad neighbors. The reason is that we don't give da'wah to our neighbors. Our non-Muslim neighbors, we don't give them da'wah. They're just goria, right? They're just gore. And that's an issue. That it's our responsibility. We don't do that enough. وَقَطِيئَةُ الْأَرْحَامِ. This is within the family, there will be a lot of breaking of ties. That's again something that it's a bleak picture, it's a bad picture to paint, but if we look within our own families, I'm sure most of us will know about some problem between one uncle and one son, or one brother and another brother, one sister and his brother's wife, and some crazy thing like that. There must be some connection somewhere down there. Just needs one bad person and then the other person reacts. Hearts aren't big. And the other one is that the sword will become unused, will become, you can say, unused from jihad. It won't be used in the jihad. So it'll just be kind of lying around. Fighting jihad, the faridah of jihad will not take place for whatever reason. And the dunya will be acquired by using the deen. People will use the deen to acquire the dunya. Nowadays, to study Islamic studies is very fashionable for non-Muslims as well, because it's needed to teach in different parts of the world, to go and you can be hired by the American army, the British army or whatever, to do translation, to give them understanding, to write up policies, to do many different things. So studying Islam now, even for non-Muslims, is a big deal. It's a very big money-making thing. And that's just for non-Muslims we're talking about. And I'm sure there's an aspect within the Muslims as well for that. Ibn Abi Shayba relates from Raja ibn Haywa that لا تقوم الساعة حتى لا تحمل النخلة إلا تمرة. The day of judgment will not occur until a palm tree, a date palm, will not bear even a single date. Or if it does, it'll be a single date. I'm not sure if this is here because I don't have much experience with date palms, but we do, alhamdulillah, we do have dates. If they don't come from somewhere else, they come from California. And if not, then the Israelis try to push their dates in. So there are still a lot of dates, it seems, around the world. And Muslims eat a lot of dates. But there will be a time when there will be a severe shortage. But this doesn't necessarily just refer to dates, it refers to anything. It's just production in general. And that will be a time before Dajjal comes out, that the third year before he comes out, there'll be 1/3 less crops. In the second year before he comes out, there'll be 2/3 less crop. And in the year before he comes out, there'll be an overall drought, no crops. When he does emerge, then he'll do all these fancy magical tricks of causing the crops to grow, which will try to convince people that he is the one to believe in and to follow. So maybe it's referring to that. Allah knows best. Then the next hadith is from Ibn Abi Shayba, again from Mujahid. من أشراط الساعة موت البدار. And from Sha'bi it says من اقتراب الساعة موت الفجأة. We already read about this earlier on. That from the signs of the Day of Judgment is sudden deaths. So vast amounts of sudden death. As we've just had a Japanese tsunami. What's the figures now? 15,000 officially or something? 15 to 20,000 people, just in a matter of a few hours, a few days. May Allah protect us. MashaAllah, may Allah reward this author. He's gone through pretty much all of the books of hadith and gathered together all of these signs. One of the most comprehensive collections I've seen of these kind of intermediate signs. Okay, let's make a dua. Allahumma anta salam wa minka salam tabarak ya dhal jalali wal ikram. Allahumma ya hayyu ya qayyum bi rahmatika nastaghith. Allahumma ya hannan ya mannan la ilaha illa anta subhanaka inna kunna min adh-dhalimin. Jazallahu anna Muhammadan ma huwa ahluhu. Allahumma ighfir lana warhamna wa'afina wahdina warzuqna. اللهم إنا نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من الهم والحزن والبخل والجبن والكبر والسحر والمعاصي اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من فتنة المحيا والممات اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من فتنة المسيح الدجال اللهم اشف مرضانا اللهم اشف مرضانا اللهم اغفر لموتانا المسلمين اللهم اغفر لموتانا المسلمين الذين شهدونك بالوحدانية وماتوا على ذلك Oh Allah, accept our du'as. Oh Allah, allow us to make our salats complete and proper and for your sake. Oh Allah, accept all of our salats for us and forgive our shortcomings. Oh Allah, allow us to improve our salats day by day. Oh Allah, that every day they become more enhanced. Oh Allah, allow us an understanding of your deen and the following of your deen and the sunnah of your messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Oh Allah, make that easy for us and make it not difficult for us. Make it such that we do not have to hide and do things. Oh Allah, give us all a clear conscience and give us all guidance on the right path. Oh Allah, inspire us all with our guidance, with the guidance that takes us in the path of paradise. O Allah, in the path of your pleasure. O Allah, give us the kalima la ilaha illallah on our deathbed. O Allah, make all of the stages of the hereafter easy for us. O Allah, grant us a drink from the hands of your Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. O Allah, grant us a place in Jannatul Firdaus. O Allah, grant us all a place in Jannatul Firdaus. All of our deceased, O Allah, grant them all a place in Jannatul Firdaus. O Allah, all those who are sick among us and all those in this community, O Allah, grant them cure from their sickness and from their ailments. O Allah, give us barakah in everything we are to do. O Allah, allow us to use our days and our time properly. O Allah, to our youth properly. O Allah, those of us who are studying, grant them barakah and blessing in their studies. Those who are working, grant them barakah and blessing in their work, in their employment, in their businesses. O Allah, in their marriages. O Allah, those who are not married, O Allah, grant them suitable partners and spouses. O Allah, protect us all, protect our children. O Allah, grant us children who are the cause of the gladness of our eyes. O Allah, those who O Allah, accept us and our children for the service of your deen. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifuna wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.